don't know.
Yeah.
Ready then?
Good evening and welcome to this meeting. May we start? First of all, I think let's continue now. The meeting this evening will be live streamed to the public. A recording of the public part of the meeting will be available on the council's website within 24 hours of the meeting. Would members and officers please remember to switch their microphone on when speaking and off when they have finished speaking in the council chamber, and ensure the microphone is positioned near you and speak directly into the microphone. Would attendees please switch off mobile phones or put on silent mode. If you need to take the call, please leave the room. Thank you. Okay. Apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair. Apologies from Councillor Pedersen.
Minutes of the meeting held on 31st of October 22. And
Yeah,
agree? Thank you. This Section 106 Local Government Finance Act.
None that I'm aware of, Chair.
Okay. Disclosure of interest.
I would like to declare an interest for item number 7, as does the taxi driver.
I'll also like to declare an interest for item number 7. My husband's also a taxi driver. Thank you.
Yes.
None, Chair.
Reference from committees and other bodies.
Again, none, Chair.
Okay. That comes to number 7.
Listed in the last section, so they can stay in the room.
They can stay in the room. Yeah. Okay. So you can stay in the room. Okay. Thank you. Okay. The scale of fee and charges. That's you. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So members will recall that some fees and charges were increased with effect from the 1st of November due to the unprecedented increase in inflation and the increased cost of providing services. But not all sales fees and charges were reviewed mid-year, and given that inflation is expected to continue to run at a higher level, the expectation is that the cost of services will remain high. At the time of writing the report, the latest published CPI was for October 22 and was 11.1%. Since then, we've had November's figures published. There was a slight reduction down to 10.7%, but it's still sitting at a very high level. So the report in front of you tonight presents the outcome of the full annual review of fees and charges proposals to be applied from the 1st of April 2023 for those services that fall under this committee, as listed in Appendix 1 on pages 18 to 33 of your papers. Of those services, only licensing and the registration service increased some of their fees and charges in November. There were no mid-year increases for food and environmental health, trading standards or highways licenses. So a number of the services and charges that the council can levy are regulatory or statutory, and quite a lot for this committee are regulatory or statutory. And therefore, those are not proposed to be increased unless we've been informed by the regulatory body that charges can be increased. So the vast majority of the proposed increases in front of you tonight relate to discretionary charges. Now, with increasing costs and the need to set a balanced budget, income generation is a key element of the council's budget, and it's vital to the council's overall financial position and for the viability and continued provision of those discretionary services. So on to the substance of the report. The table in paragraph 13 of the report shows that the council currently derives estimated income of just over £1.5 million from these fees and charges for the services that you're considering tonight. The proposed increase for 23-24 are estimated to deliver an additional £58,900, which is an increase in income yield of 4%. Appendix A on page 17 of your paper shows how that 58,900 is made up across individual service areas, with 33,000 roughly relating to licensing and just under 20,000 relating to the registration service. That table also shows the average proposed increase or percent increase in charges and the percent increase in income yield for each individual service area. Very quickly in relation to specific charges, Chair, paragraph 15 of the report relates to the proposals for licensing. And just to give you a bit of context behind these, the charges for Hackney carriage and private hire licences were increased mid-year by just under 10%. And the proposal is to increase them by a further 5.5% from the 1st of April to ensure that the service can recover the additional costs that they're going to be incurring in 23-24. And just to align that for you, the estimated cost of the licensing service has increased by 5.6% for next year. So the proposals are set to just recover those costs. In relation to registration services, there's not a lot to say really. The proposed charges or to be increased are all discretionary charges, and the average increase is just 3.4% across all services. With that, Chair, I've got a couple of officers in attendance who may be able to answer any specific questions that members may have, and with that, I'll pass it back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Tony, do you have anything to say or anything?
Only just to emphasise what Darren has reported, and the fact that obviously we're looking to recoup the costs as predicted for an additional 5.6% inflation. The work that was done mid-year brings us up to a position. So previously, we would normally be looking to recover the fees retrospectively. So the costs, the mid-year changes meant that we are now up to date, as it were, and we are now projecting forward the costs of the service going forward for the next 12 months. So that's the 5.6% is what we expect the cost of the service to increase by. Therefore, we're looking for the fees to match that. So actually, we keep pace rather than doing this behind the curve or retrospectively. I hope that assists.
Thank you, Chair. I notice on the page over the page on page 20, the gambling people, no increases there. Have we got control of this, or is this from central government? Because the gambling industry is there to be bled white. No sympathies there. I'll tell you that now.
I understand what you're saying, Councillor. Unfortunately, so elements there, you'll see the long list to do with the licensing act for licensed premises and also gambling premises. Licensing act have a capped figure. That's what we can charge. So that's set by government. Gambling has a maximum fee that we charge. We charge the maximum fee allowed by the regulations. Unfortunately, we can't increase above that. So you'll see the long list of zero increases. They're all the statutory fees that we are presented with. I can assure you that we charge the maximum allowed under the regulations.
Supplementary. Can we make representations to government to take control of what we do milk from the gaming industry in the town? I no doubt other councils would be chapping at the bit to do the same. I don't know whether there's a coordinated drive could be made, representations made to government.
We do work regularly with the LGA in particular. There are particular issues we do lobby with regards to the Licensing Act fees because they were set way back in 2005 and haven't changed. And you can imagine that our fees have increased and our costs have increased. So we lobby regularly, and there was discussion, I think 18 months ago, that they would give local authorities the powers to set their fees, maybe capped, but they were certainly looking at that as part of the House of Lords reforms. By all means, I'm more than happy to take back and feedback from this committee with regards to the gambling fees as well.
The Hackney fees, carriage fees, are they on par with the rest of the country, or are we?
I can confirm, yes, we do benchmarking as part of this process, and I assess these against our nearest neighbours, and both from a SIPFA point of view and also our physical geographical nature. We're certainly, when we're looking at our assessments of about 20 authorities, I think we are nowhere near the most expensive. We still have other authorities charging more than we do. It varies from the different licence types, but on the majority, we don't even feature in the top 5. So we do benchmark, but obviously our costs are our costs. Not all, you know, and local authorities set their fees in different ways. So it's difficult to get a complete full assessment, but we do that benchmarking, and as I say, we're nowhere near by the most expensive. There are authorities that charge significantly more, and there are authorities that charge less. But it will vary on the number of licenses, you know, how much time they spend doing policy work. There's a whole range of different factors, but we do undertake a very in-depth assessment and calculation of all of the fees, not just Hackney Carriage private hire, but all of those fees that we have discretion on. So scrap metal, special treatments, animal licensing, all of those go through an in-depth assessment each year to ensure that we are recovering our costs. And the other element is we are not permitted to charge more than our costs. And also the accountancy sort of framework is that we assess those fees over a 3-year rolling period. So if we make a deficit, we could have the power to recover that in fee setting going forward. Likewise, if we do make a credit in effect for fees, we can take that into account and when setting the fees for the following year to balance it out. But by law, we cannot make a profit. So the fees that are proposed are the costs for our service. But say we're nowhere near the most expensive in our local area or against our nearest neighbours from a sort of population and distribution side of things as well.
If you pick up a taxi in Luton and then you cross the boundary into South Beds, what fee are you actually paying?
So licence holders have the ability to licence where they choose now, and you've seen probably this more often now. Luton, we have a lot of London TfL vehicles. Something about 2,500 residents of Luton choose to licence in London. Equally, we have licence holders who reside in Luton who licence with Decorum, East Herts, Central Beds, Cambridgeshire, Bedford, you name it. So actually, I think when we did the calculations during the pandemic, when we did the assessment then of residents in Luton who were licensed, it was something in the region of 3,600 licensed elsewhere, which is about twice the amount of our own local trade. So it gives a massive spread. But I mean, license holders are even licensing in places like Wolverhampton. There is choice. There is consumer choice out there now. It's no longer, just due to the nature of the industry and communications and app-based bookings and on the websites, and that you're no longer constrained by how far your radio you can receive or your mobile. You can literally, if you're prepared to travel, if you're prepared to test your vehicle, then you can travel to the whichever location you wish to choose to license in. And as long as you work for an operator in that district and you have, certainly for private hire, the triad of licensing in place, then that is totally lawful. So there is consumer choice out there for the trade. Not so much so obviously for Hackney Carriage, because obviously they can only predominantly ply within the district in which they are licensed. So obviously they're tied to the public service and the public ranks in Luton.
Say I can hear bells. I noticed you're not increasing tattoo artist fees. Is that another statutory thing, or?
Your pardon, I thought they were going up by 5%. Sorry, my computer's just locked me out. I won't be a moment.
Yeah, skin piercing tattoos. Skin piercing tattoos, etc., going up by over 5%. That's on page, what page am I on? Page 23 of your papers. No, page 23. You have digital media at the bottom, then you've got the sex establishments above that, and then you've got the tattooing above that.
Any more question? No? It's now okay. Any member wish to make comment or anything? Okay, I have one, I'm going to propose the recommendation. Only one thing which I need clarification from Darren. It says charges to be implemented from 1st of April 23 as soon as after this date, subject to any amendments it deems necessary. Are you expecting a lot of amendments?
No, Chair. All of these charges will be implementable from the 1st of April. I think that's a hangover from the overall report, where we have other charges that go to other committees, such as the music service, which has to be increased from September because it has to align with the school term. All the charges for this committee can be increased from the 1st of April.
If I may just add to that, there are certain fees that are requiring advertising. So some of the private hire fees are required to go out as public notice. If we receive representations as to those, then we would be required to bring that back to this committee. So I think the report tries to address that there are certain fees that are subject to other procedures that may delay those. So if you take the mid-year increases, the fees due to the advertising and the public notice, etc., some of those fees weren't able to be introduced until January. So even though the report was back in November, we weren't able to implement those legally until January. Likewise, there may be delays dependent, and we can't predict what that may look like. But if we do need to bring that back, that would obviously delay the implementation of those fees.
I think question was related to this. Will that amendment bring back to the committee?
From my perspective, only if we get representations, and it would be on those that were advertised.
Okay. Okay, I propose the recommendations. Do we agree?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, everyone. My name is Anne Davis. I'm the HR Business Manager for HR Strategy. And this evening I have two reports for you. They are slightly connected, so hopefully that will be clear as I move through them. The first one is with regard to the most recent NJC Pay Award 2022-23. Which stipulated the deletion of spinal column point 1, which is the lowest hourly pay within the council, with effect from this coming April, from the 1st of April 2023. So what I'm asking for tonight from this committee is to agree the deletion of spinal column point 1 in line with the national pay stipulation, and to note the implications of the increase of 1 day to annual leave entitlement to those employees whose pay is also determined by the national NJC, National Joint Council for Local Government Services. And the committee is recommended to implement the deletion of that lowest spinal column point in the following way. that with effect from the 1st of April, our lowest grade, L1A, will be deleted, and with effect from the 1st of April 2023, L1A will attract pay at spinal column point 2, which is the next rung up on the pay ladder. And that with effect from the same date, the 1st of April 23, all those whose pay on the preceding day, the 31st of March, attracts pay at spinal column point 1 will automatically move to the next spinal column point. And then the same thing happens for the grade above that, L1B, that from the 1st of April, L1B again becomes a spot point grade, which attracts pay at spinal column point 3. And finally, the committee is asked to note the increase of 1 day to annual leave entitlement to those employees whose pay is determined by the National Joint Council for Local Government Services. That NJC pay negotiations covers well over 90% of our workforce within the council. The only people who aren't paid on that are a very small number of employees who are paid on what's called Solbury, and those are like clinical psychologists, school improvement advisors, those kind of people, and the senior management team, so your service directors, your corporate directors, and Robin as chief exec. But everybody else is affected by this paper here this evening, certainly the ones at the lower end of the scale. So the 22-23 pay deal for NJC staff has been agreed. It was incredibly late, but it was agreed, and we managed to get it paid to employees before Christmas. And as part of that agreement, it was stipulated that the NJC has agreed that from the 1st of April, spinal column point 1 will be permanently deleted from the NJC pay spine. So we have no choice in this, because as at Luton Council, we follow the National Joint Pay negotiations, and therefore we have to get rid of that spinal column point. It won't exist from the 1st of April. And the way that we're proposing to do that is that the lowest point on the pay spine is currently a spot grade at L1A, spinal column point 1, and we will simply make our lowest grade a spot grade at spinal column point 2. And then L1B will be another spot grade at spinal column point 3. All of the employees who are already paid on spinal column point 3, they are currently L1B, they're unaffected, except insofar as their colleagues who might have been on the increment below that will now be paid at the same rate as they are. But they're all the same grade, they're all doing the same graded job, so there isn't an issue there. Within the council's workforce, there are relatively few people affected by this, to be fair. You can see in section 7 of my report that we have only 8 people at the very lowest point of the scale and 5 at the next point, and then 69 at spinal column point 3. And as I've said, those people at spinal column point 3 aren't really affected. So 82 people all in all, if you count the highest point of L1B. In the community schools, it's a very different picture, and that's why I've had to take some time to make the schools aware of this. Again, they have no choice in the matter. School governors normally have some sway and determination over pay matters, but when it's a national joint negotiation pay award, then they have to comply, and they have to comply in the same way as our centrally employed workforce. The numbers in section 8, you can see, are considerably higher, 620 people affected within the schools. The majority at spinal column point 1 and 2, to be fair, 592 and 15 respectively. But their full-time equivalent numbers are very low compared to that headcount. You can see 152.64 full-time equivalents. And that's reasonably easy to explain because, of course, there are a great number of part-time, very short-hour workers within our schools. So the headcount's large, but the actual full-time equivalent is much lower. The types of job roles, both in the council and within the schools, are listed in Appendix 1 and 2, so you can get a flavour for the people affected here. In effect, it's very good news for the people who are paid at the lowest end of our pay scale, and that has to be good news for the town and for the council and for our mission statement of nobody being in poverty. So from the 1st of April, the 2 lowest grades at Luton will be spot point grades. L1A will be spinal column point 2 and L1B will be spinal column point 3. So that deals with the pay matters that we have to implement as a council. And then with regard to the 1-day additional annual leave payment entitlement, that was probably the fastest negotiation with the trade unions in the history of my time at Luton. I think we had that one agreed in less than 5 minutes. So we apply an extra day's annual leave to everybody on the NJC pay spines. And I've updated, or my team have updated our annual leave scheme in order to reflect that. At Luton, we pay 25 days initially, and that rises to 30 days per annum after 5 years continuous service with that extra day applied. And then from spinal column point 9, which is about L4, which is kind of an administrative officer type grade, to give you an idea. People start at 26 days, and then again it rises to the extra 5 days, 31 days after 5 years. And from M1, second point of M1, 20 days, 27 days on starting and 32 days after 5 years. So we've just updated that table within the annual leave scheme. The impact of the additional day of leave will be predominantly affecting frontline services where those extra days leave are actually covered in some way with a shift pattern. But I don't expect it will have a huge impact on non-frontline services. People are not going to find a way to do 1 day's extra work. Your workload is your workload, and you'll do that in the normal way. So annual leave entitlements for employees paid on Soulbury, chief officers, which are your service directors, corporate directors, and the chief executive himself, are not affected by this. It wasn't part of their pay negotiations, and therefore that extra day doesn't apply in those cases to those people who are paid on those terms. As I've said, consultation was, reasonably extensive here in terms of I had to make sure that the schools were aware of the deletion of the spinal column point and also the extra day's leave. So all of that has run its course with the schools, and the chair of primary heads and the chair of secondary heads will be alerted to what's happening here. The equalities data is set out within the report, and there are appendices there, if you're interested. But in all aspects, it's a good news story, so it doesn't affect any protected groups in a detrimental way. And that is the report, Chair. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Thank you, Anne, and it was a detailed report. Good. Any questions? Yes, Councillor Mead.
Thank you, Chair. I think I know the answer to this, but just to be 100% clear in my own mind, the 30 days entitlement, that doesn't include bank holidays.
It doesn't, no. The 8 bank holidays or 9 or 10, depending on which year we're in at the moment, is in addition to the annual leave days, yes.
More question? Agree with the recommendations stated in paragraph 2, subsection 1, 2, and 3.
Yes, Chair.
3. Thank you. Thank you, Anne. The next one is yours as well? Okay.
Is more familiar to you. This is my usual annual trip to this committee to talk about the foundation real living wage. And the committee is recommended to consider two options and to decide which to agree. Fairly straightforward in that from the 1st of April, the uplifted real living wage rate of £10.90 per hour to be adopted by the council by applying pay supplements to the lowest two spinal column points. And this is where the two reports are connected, because the lowest two spinal column points from April, of course, will be spinal column point 2 and 3, because we've already dealt with the deletion of spinal column point 1. Or committee can decide that the council does not pay a supplement from the 1st of April to match the real living wage and reverts to the hourly rates of the pay specified by the National NJC pay spine. At the meeting on the 14th of November, the corporate leadership team recommended option 1 above to the committee. But as ever, pay matters are dealt with at this committee, and therefore you need to agree this. The council takes an annual decision every year whether to apply the foundation living wage, the real living wage, to those lower spinal column points. Since October 2014, when the Living Wage Foundation came into being, this committee has approved pay supplements to employees paid on those lower spinal column points. And apart from in the year 21-22, the committee agreed to pay them from the 1st of April. The only difference in the 21-22 was that you wish to await the pay award for that particular year. So in terms of what this looks like financially, the Living Wage Foundation announced an increase of 10.1%, not surprising with the cost of living as it is at the moment, because they are looking at the real cost of people's home life and their shopping and their bills, etc. 10.1% increase takes it to £10.90 per hour. And from 30th of September last year, when I did the data cut, as you could see from the previous report, there were 82 employees within the council whose hourly rate sat beneath that real living wage threshold of £10.90 per hour. The types of roles are handy person, adult social care, and in population wellbeing, and surveillance officers, school crossing patrol, and operatives in street cleansing. So our very lowest paid workers are the ones who benefit from your decision tonight. The national pay negotiations for 23-24 are underway, I'm pleased to say, but I think it's unlikely that they will be concluded by the 1st of April, even though the national employers are really driving the trade unions to that point to try to get the pay negotiations on time and to pay the pay award when it should be paid from the 1st of April. But at least we're underway, but I'm not entirely convinced that we'll be there by the 1st of April. So assuming that's the case, then the pay supplements will therefore be as follow, at least initially, until the pay award increases the spinal column points. And I've set those pay supplements out in section 10. The pay supplements can be adjusted or removed depending on the agreed NJC pay award for 23-24, because obviously if the base pay increases, then the supplement would decrease, because we're only trying to match £10.90 per hour and not pay anything more than that if that's not stipulated. As the previous report said, part of the pay award for 22-23 was to delete that first spinal column point. Therefore, all those currently on spinal column point 1 must be paid spinal column point 2 as a minimum. So in effect, if you look at the table at section 10, it'll be all the people on spinal column point 1 and 2 currently whose pay would be matched to £10.90, in addition to all the ones currently on spinal column point 3. So committee is requested to approve that the cohort of 82 employees currently receiving the lowest pay in the council are paid that required supplement to match the real living wage with effect from the 1st of April at £10.90 an hour. There's a section just to remind you about the national picture in terms of national minimum wage and the various apprenticeship rates, etc., just to kind of put it in context. Provision has been made within the 23-24 salaries budgets for the extra costs associated with this to be factored in. So that's as it is every year. The money is set aside to do this. And finally, the council encourages the 39 community schools to adopt the foundation living wage, but this is one decision that those boards of governors take individually within those schools. I go to the schools forum every year, and I tell them what the increase is, and I encourage them to adopt it, but they have to make that decision individually for each of the Luton community schools. And there are 33 community schools for which the council holds that payroll data, because some of the schools now don't use the council to provide their payroll, so we don't have their staffing data. But what we do have, I've set down there, and as you can see, the numbers are quite extensive within the schools in terms of who would be affected by the foundation living wage. Been a declining picture, I have to say, within the schools. Previously, around a third of them adopted the real living wage, and currently we have, I think, one, maybe two schools. I think it's only one school that actually adopts the foundation living wage. But I do my part every year, and I try to encourage them to do that. And they usually tell me that their budgets are extremely tight, and if they paid this, then it would mean that they would have to reduce their staffing cohort, and that would mean redundancies, etc. So I can understand what they tell me, but even so, I do encourage them to do it. The equalities information is there at section 17 and beyond. So the committee is recommended to consider those two options and to decide which to agree, either to adopt the foundation living wage at £10.90 from the 1st of April or not. And finally, what we're looking at here is obviously to try to keep the level of pay for employees above that cost of living threshold, and paying the real living wage is a national initiative, and it represents a proportionate means of achieving a legitimate aim to pay people a little bit more. And of course, it addresses poverty, which is a key strategic priority for the council. And that concludes my report. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you very much.
Any questions? Go on, okay. All right.
On the bottom of page 67, where it discusses the finance general fund, it says here, therefore, there would be no financial impact on the general fund over and above that which has been provided for within the 23-24 budgets, if the council agrees to pay the living wage for its workforce. So in other words, I'm reading that there's no real impact on the council's finances if we go ahead with the giving everybody the minimum wage.
Bit of extra money, that's common sense and basic arithmetic. But what is saying is that I have liaised with finance. I've told them the numbers. They're very clear on that, and obviously within the council's workforce, the numbers are quite small, and they have factored this in. As if you've already made a decision at this committee. They factored the financial impact into the 23-24 budgets. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
No more question? Okay, so which recommendation? First one? That's that from 1st of April 23, the uplifted real living wage rate of 10.90 per hour be adopted by the council by applying pay supplements to the lowest two spinal column endpoints SCP S2 and 3 on the NJC pay spine, and that school be encouraged to pay the same. Is that agreed? Thank you. Yeah. Okay. Sir, it's your turn next. Present your
Thank you
report.
very much. Good
Thank-
evening, everybody. I have two papers, but they are linked. So if I start with the first one, these are both to do with the partial restructure of the housing service or part of the housing operations service. The first part of it is about looking at a change to the structure in relation to the new social housing regulation and to improve service delivery. All of you, I'm sure, will remember Grenfell and the dreadful impact that has had on social housing. As a result of that, the government have spent quite some time looking at the regulation of social housing. Back in the day, we had regular inspections of social housing. Those stopped over 10 years ago, but what the government are intending to do is create a framework of new legislation and oversight for all social landlords of over 1,000 units, which of course covers our housing stock at Luton. We have a social housing bill that is going to be passed fairly soon. We have a new housing regulator with strengthened powers, and they will be starting to have oversight of our housing stock and other landlords in April next year. They are expected to be Ofsted-style inspections with potentially unlimited fines. Now, we would obviously take this seriously, but in that light, it's something that we have to look at very carefully and how we make sure that we don't end up with a serious detriment test for intervention by the regulator. In addition to that, we have already got the Housing Ombudsman, who has been given additional powers for dealing with housing complaints. And we know that the two organisations, the regulator and the Housing Ombudsman, will be working closely together to see if they can identify any landlords where there are any issues. And that has already started. Some of you may have seen reports in the press from the Housing Ombudsman about complaints about damp and mould, for example. We are going to also have some new tenant satisfaction measures, TSMs, which is something that you'll probably hear about quite a lot in the future. Those will be coming in from next April. Some of them will be measured through a survey, a STAR survey. I'm sure some of you have heard of the STAR survey before. And some of them will be from existing performance reports that we create. So those are things that we have to meet, and the housing regulator will be monitoring very closely performance against those TSMs, not only for individual landlords, but compared with other landlords across the sector. So I've talked about the Housing Ombudsman. We have a new complaint handling code, which we already have to meet. So we've invested quite a lot of time in that already. In addition to that, there is more work around building safety. We have the Building Safety Act, which is already in, and we have the Fire Safety Act as well. So there's an awful lot of new legislation coming in, a lot more compliance, a lot more oversight on what we have to do. As a result of this, Housing Operations is keen to work on towards ISO 2001 quality standard to improve both service quality and customer services. And at present, we have no resource in the service to do that. So the proposal is to bring in a new team of housing compliance, a small team within the service, working within tenancy management, a manager and 2 officers, in order to help us move along that route, and particularly around the quality accreditation and making sure that we get the data, the performance right. In addition to that, because of the increased focus on tenant participation within the service, there is a requirement as well to put a little bit more resource on tenant participation. They are a very small team at the moment. There's only 3 of them. and we would like to have 0.5 of a post to assist with that process. So what I'm asking for this evening is agreement for us moving forward on that. The total cost will all come out of the housing revenue account, and it's £141,000, not pounds. Gosh, that would be reasonable, wouldn't it? £141,000. This has gone through numerous consultations, and also in terms of equality, the IIA has been completed as well with no issues raised.
Thank you. Are these three posts all new? There is, I thought there was one tenants participation officer already in place.
Sorry?
Tenants participation officer.
Yes, there's only 0.5 of a tenant participation officer who would be to join the existing tenant participation team, and then a small housing compliance team. And what we've agreed with finance is we would start off with one officer, see how we got on. And if we need the second officer to go through the ISO 2001, then we'll recruit that at a later date.
Any questions from Sarah Markham?
How do you get 0.5 of a person?
Work part-time.
So
Yeah, they'll just be a part-time worker.
he's part-time, or she, or that person is part-time,
Yeah,
but the people under he or she are full-time. Yes?
yeah, they would just work part of the week, that's all.
So we've got a part-timer administering permanent workers.
No, because we have a tenant participation team anyway, so they will just work part of the week, so half of the week, in conjunction with the rest of the
Is that
team.
workable?
Yeah, it does, yeah. We've already got part-timers within the
Well, you're
team.
going to say yes. aren't
Yeah.
you?
In fact, 2 of the other officers existing, as part of the existing team, already part-timers. So yes, it does. And bear in mind, with tenant participation, a lot of the work is in the evenings as well, where evening meetings with tenant groups, etc. So it does work well.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Working. Yeah. Building Safety Act. I'm a bit concerned about this. It says 18 metres or 6 stories in height. Is this for buildings which are totally just for rent? Or
It is residential. It's based around residential buildings. It's as a result of Grenfell.
it'll be a tower block in Luton, which is 22 stories high. Just wondering how building regulations will cover that.
It should. It's not. It's not one of our buildings, but
No, it's not one of
yeah,
them.
if it's residential, it should be included. Yes, but it wouldn't be something that we would deal with. But obviously, we have got our own high-rise, so and other blocks
True,
as well.
yeah.
I mean, we have 10 high-rise blocks, and we have around about 450 low-rise blocks
But not
at Luton
22
as well.
stories high. Okay, all right.
If there are no more questions, I move the recommendation that is stated in paragraph 2 of page 70. Agree? Yep. The next one is your assessor.
It's me too, I'm afraid, yes. This is the second part of this, which is in preparation for the housing regulation, but also to improve our service. And this is to change the way that we're working at the moment. At the moment, we have 3 teams involved in rental income, which is split between tenancy service, rents administration, and temporary accommodation. What's happened in the past is for secure tenants, the lower rent arrears have been dealt with by the rents and admin team on a telephone basis. Temporary accommodation, the arrears have all been dealt with by specialist housing officers, along with other things as well, in terms of tenancy management. I'm really sorry, I'm losing my voice. And for secure tenants, the higher arrears have been dealt with by generic housing officers. We know that this doesn't work. It certainly hasn't worked for us since it's been in, so we've been looking to change this to something that's more efficient, that's more responsive to tenants. At the moment, people, particularly in secure accommodation, have been passed between officers, and it's not the best customer care, to be quite frank with you. Plus, it doesn't work. We know from that because we work with a company called RentSense, and RentSense have said that this hybrid approach, as they call it, is the least effective way of collecting rental income. So we know that the housing revenue account is ring fenced, so we've got to get the money in the best way that we can, the most efficient way that we can, and in the most supportive way we can with tenants. And obviously, the more money we get in, the more money that we can use to pay for things like new accommodation. So the aim of this is to consolidate the income management into one specialist team. Now, we have been running a pilot on this for nearly 18 months now as a proof of concept to make sure that we are confident that it works. And as a result of that, on the HRA rent arrears side, our arrears fell below £1 million for the first time for a number of years. So it does actually work. And it also enables you to actually have a focused approach towards rent collection, which is structured and covered, so everybody's being treated in the same way. In addition to that, we have the need to put a little bit more resource in terms of the antisocial behaviour. Antisocial behaviour certainly went up over COVID. I think there's obviously quite a lot of unhappiness out there as a result of COVID, and we've had a lot more issues with antisocial behaviour. We house a lot of vulnerable tenants, and that can cause us issues in terms of our tenancy management. So we need to have just a slightly increased resource enabled to manage that properly. In addition to that, we have this change in regulation, the Ofsted style approach that we're having, and this tripartite of agencies overseeing social housing regulation, including the tenant participation. So what we're proposing to do, as I say, is to create two teams, tenancy services and income management. We have had the new jobs evaluated, which means that we will have team leaders who will have a slightly increased pay grade as a result of further responsibility. We will also be introducing a specialist housing commercial team manager. This housing commercial team manager will manage the right to buy, which is a key service for us. In addition, garages bring in a lot more money than anybody realises, or a lot of people realise. They bring in nearly £800,000 a year. So it's important that we have a focused approach to the management of those garages. The tenants insurance scheme, which has the ability to bring in a little bit more money for us, not a fortune, but a little bit more money. And also to manage the growing number of leasehold properties which we get, because we've got over 850 leasehold properties now. Those are flats that have been sold under the right to buy. So what it's proposed is that we move the existing housing officers. We have a lot of generic housing officers, and we actually make them into specialist officers. We have some who become tenancy officers just specialising in tenancy issues. Then we have income officers specialising in rental income, so that that's all they deal with. Rent accounting officers dealing with the rent accounting issues, which are things like making sure the direct debits are set up correctly. It's really important that you get that right, because we are all disaccredited and we don't want to lose that. And plus having temporary accommodation officers with the aim to move those specialist temporary accommodation officers in the next phase of this over to the housing needs team, into housing solutions, so that they work with the housing solutions officers on those homeless cases, which is a much more efficient and effective way of working. And the two roles are very closely linked. So that's basically what we're intending to do. It will involve an actual slight increase in the number of officers. We have as I say, the extra antisocial behaviour officer, an additional resource in terms of the leasehold. And that's simply because at the moment we have one leasehold officer dealing with 850 properties. We've reached the point where we need to move over to the next level because that's just too many officers for one too many properties for one officer. So that's basically it. The cost of this will be, in terms of the regrading, it will be an additional 65,000. This is all from the housing revenue account. And the increase in staffing, which is the ASB officer and the commercial officer, that is the person who is doing the leasehold, will cost an additional 82,000. But that will be fully service charged back to our tenants, because that's something we can do in terms of the rent. So that is the report. I'm asking for agreement to move forward with this so that we can actually improve our service and have a more focused service, particularly around income, particularly at the moment where we have some real issues with affordability in Luton. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Mead.
It's more of an observation than a question. I don't think there's a councillor on the council who doesn't get a drip of complaints about antisocial behaviour. So anything to improve the situation, I'm sure, would be welcomed right across the council. And if you can improve that situation, power to your elbow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I can just respond to that, we do deal with several hundred cases of antisocial behaviour every year. While we work with the enforcement team, a lot of the issues in terms of tenancy and housing and antisocial behaviour are very, very much tied to the tenancy management. So it is useful to have that specialist service. So yeah, thank you very much.
No more question or comment? Or you have? Okay, thank you.
Right. Garages. I'm assuming that we do, but does the council know who owns the garages? Are they included in the rents of council tenants? Or are they privately rented out? Not private, but are they rented out separately?
In terms of the garages, it's about 50-50. We have, in the past, Luton Council has sold garages when people buy their properties, but we don't, but we don't do that anymore. So we have garage sites which are, some of them are actually owned by the people who've bought the property and they bought the garage at the time. Some of them are rented to council tenants and some of them are rented privately. And when we look at the ones that we still own, it's about 50-50. 50% of them are rented by council tenants and about 50% of them are rented privately.
Yeah. Do we know, or do we have any way of knowing if that garage is actually used as a garage or just as a storage area? Difficult question, actually.
It is a little bit of a difficult question. We do know that a lot of modern cars don't fit in our garages. So we have had some complaints from people who've come to us and said, we'd like to rent a garage, but actually they find their vehicle doesn't fit in. We don't know, but we suspect that quite a few of them are actually used for storage.
So can we do anything about that? Or is it a case of, are there any conditions on renting a garage? Does it have to be used as, well, for a car?
Not necessarily, no. They don't have to just be used for a car. As long as somebody's prepared to pay the rent. What we do say is if people store within our garages, we do have a disclaimer in that they're not specialist storage units. So obviously, you know, they're not as secure as if you have hire a specialist storage unit somewhere.
Any time?
It's very difficult to actually get into garages, so no, no, we don't.
I'm basically asking this question because I do have trouble with parking in my area.
Right.
Ward. And I know there are garages there, and I know the garages are just sitting there. And I just wondered if they were associated, or if the council know they're empty, in fact. Or what? Is there going to be any review on garages at all? Any checkups?
Well, it's funny you say that actually, because we're doing a review of garages at the moment, looking at our garage sites. We have a number of garage sites which have not been used. They've been put aside for development. And we are looking at very closely at our garage sites. Some of those sites could be in the future used for other things, for example. So yeah, we are actually reviewing garages at the moment. But when people pay the rent, we do kind of assume that they are using them.
Thank you, Chair. While we're on the question of garages, I used to walk to work when I worked at the Electrolux, and I went through the Hockwell Ring estate, and there was a block of garages there. Now, some of them would, the doors were broken and half hanging off, and there was various rumours circulating what went on in these garages. I take it these weren't owned by the council. These would have been privately owned or taken over privately and been allowed to go to rack and ruin. Or do we have rack and ruin garages on our books?
We do have some garages that need work, and that is something that the garage review is looking at the moment. What our aim is to look at those garages that are not being used, and those sites which have become derelict. It could be, as I say, because they've been put aside for development in the past, and that development has been delayed. And then the aim is to actually look at again to see whether those garage sites are going to be in demand, and if so, refurbish them, or potentially look at those garage sites for another use. So, for example, we may decide to look at mini allotments. For example, we've already got one mini allotment on, which isn't an ex-garage site, but that's the kind of thing on Bristol Road. It could be that we offer those out. Hackney, for example, somebody sent me a link today from Hackney, who are actually creating workshops for local people. It could be we create green spaces in those garage areas. We create mini parks, and we've already started talking to parks about that. So they do create an opportunity for us as a council. No problem. I'm particularly interested in garages, so.
Agree with the recommendation stated in paragraph 2?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Page 112.
Yeah. Waiting room.
Yeah.
Oh, she's logging on. Are you ready? Okay, thank you. You may start.
Good evening, Chair, members, everyone. This is item on page 115 of the agenda. It's the recommendation to approve the OCA for the Development Management Service of the Council. It's looking to improve efficiencies and reflect better the demands on the service and better reflect the various roles within the service. The OCA has received approval from finance, HR, equalities, and legal. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any question? Sorry?
Finished actually. Got one question. Joy.
Okay, go ahead.
The 22 staff, is that what you've actually got, or is it what you need?
Staff number is 22 members of staff. That's reflected in the current structure. The new structure does create an additional new post, just one, yes. So it does create one extra post, but it's neutral in terms of its financial impacts.
Have you finished? Okay. How many enforcement officers you have at the moment?
Has 4 enforcement roles, and the new structure has 4 as well. But there's a readjustment in terms of grading within the posts.
And the planners?
In terms of the planners, there's a really helpful structure chart on the appendix. I think it's appendix 1, shows the existing structure, and you can see all the planners. There's 2 teams. So the larger team, which deals with more of the minor and other applications, you have a team leader, 2 principal planners, and 4 planners. The major application team, which deals with more complex applications, has the team leader and 2 principal planners reporting to that team leader.
I don't know whether this is the current situation or not. You had the shortages of the planners in the past. Is that overcome, or you're still with the agencies?
This is one of the reasons why we're trying to introduce this OCA to help with recruitment and retention. So that there are some vacant posts, but that's common to the planning profession throughout the country, where there is a shortage of experienced planners. We supplement our existing service by using consultants to cover the current vacant posts that we're carrying.
Going to do not using the consultants. What are you are going to do to actually avoid not using the consultants?
Okay, yeah. So the obvious strategy would be to fill the permanent posts, and this OCA is trying to achieve that. So it's creating better graded posts to attract the right sort of talented individuals that can come and fill the posts that we need. And it's allowing career progression for more junior members of staff to develop and grow into some of the other roles.
Question from? No? I move the recommendations to agree and approve the new structure. Agree?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, members.
Hi, it's me again, Chair. Jodie Yandel has asked me to cover the work programme, if that's the next agenda item, I believe it is. Is it okay to carry on? Okay. So I've been asked if we could move the item that was scheduled for the 28th of March committee, flexible ways of working review and update, if we could move that to the next committee after the one at the end of March. I don't believe we've got finalised dates yet, Matt, have we? No. So if we could just make a note that that's probably not going to go to the 28th of March committee. Flexible ways of working review update. 28th of
To the next committee meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
I can't remember what the draft dates are, but it'll be May or June, I
I
expect.
think it's 16th of February, is it?
No, it's the meeting on the 28th of March, moved to next one when the calendar hasn't been finalised.
Okay, right, okay. So next one, okay.
Yeah, it'll be in April.
Okay, yeah.
But I would like to put an extra item on the 28th of March, which is the new people strategy. So if we could have the people strategy for the 28th of March meeting, that would be good. Otherwise, in terms of the meeting on the 16th of February, as far as I'm aware, those reports are all scheduled to be presented to this committee on the 16th of February. And then all the other items on the 28th of March also are due to be scheduled for that committee, due to be presented. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Okay. Good, thank you. And that concludes the business of this meeting today. Thank you very